Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien vs. Predator Galaxy podcast. This is your usual host, Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me is my fellow aged and stuck in cryo sleep for 57 years co-host,
Adam Zeller, aka RidgeTop.
and we are joined today by two special guests. I'm imagining if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching this podcast, you also listen to these guys as well. But for the sake of continuity, please introduce yourselves here. We'll go alphabetical. We'll go Jamie first.
I'm Jamie Prater. I'm from Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I'm Patrick Greene, also from Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Real excited to be here. Of course, we're friends with you guys in real life, so it feels like we talk all the time, but it's very exciting.
Oh, and it's a pleasure to have you both here. This has been a collab, has been something that has been in the pipelines for many years. My last attempt at it ended up with it being just something we did, which was going to be the differences between the Alien, the director's cut, and the theatrical cut. That was what my last proposed subject was. But it is a nightmare sorting things out between us because of 4 different time zones between everybody here. Yeah.
Not to mention, we've been so busy, and you guys have been really busy, I know. But I've guested a few times on your podcast recently, so we thought it'd be great to have you guys finally come on to ours. So welcome.
And with these guys joining us, I wanted to talk about something that wasn't just, it wasn't just a review of something. It wasn't just us talking about one of the books or one of the films or something like that. I wanted to go with something that was a bit more meaningful. And given the severe age that is being represented on this episode right now, yes, Jamie, I'm looking at you. I do apologize. I thought it'd be fun if we talked about how our relationship has changed with the Alien franchise over the years, as we've got older, as we've learned more about the franchise, as we ourselves have had different experiences. Jamie has a relationship with the franchise that is nothing I would have ever comprehended myself. Listening to him talk about it in the past is not something is not an angle of Alien I would have ever cottoned on to. So I realized a lot recently that the things I appreciate about the franchise have really changed, and the way I look at the characters has changed a lot as my own journey through this nightmare world has continued. So I thought this one would be fun for us to do, and I'm hoping all our patrons in the chat as well. I'm hoping this will be interesting for you as well, and you'd have your own stories that you want to throw up as we go along. Who wants to start us off here? Adam, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, we got to send it to our guests first.
Well, I thought you might like to set the stage. Okay. Patrick, would you like to go first?
I'd love to go first. You mean so in the whole kind of arc of this, or just it kind of broad strokes? What do you think?
Depends how much time you want to go into. And, we're all here to nerd out.
Let's start the arc and see what shape it goes in. So okay. It's impossible for me to extricate my love and personal experience of Alien from how I have personally engaged with it. And by that, I mean, I came to Alien as I think all of us did as a child. And in that, it was this real escapist thing for me, like when I was having a hard day at school, or when I was, when I was getting in trouble for things with, disciplinary stuff, which was a big thing for me in my childhood. Alien was always something that I could go home and kind of escape to and throw Aliens on and kind of, in particular, and really, really fall in love with it. And so for a lot of time, it was really a very comforting thing and a very lonely thing. And then as I've gotten older, of course, I found community, and AvP Galaxy forums was one of the first vehicles for that for me. And then it was things like the Weyland-Yutani Bulletin, which, believe it or not, I was once a pretty big member of. And then, of course, it was Perfect Organism. And now, for me, the relationship that I have with this material has changed a lot in that it's become increasingly more of like sort of a business, which is an interesting thing as well. And in terms of when I feel happiest, I think nowadays, it's those moments where I feel like those two sides of myself as an Alien fan get to come together. When it feels less like a business and more like comfort, and when it feels less alone and more community based. And so for me now, like I look at it very much as a place to escape to with friends. If the world is a scary place, which it often is, and if things in my personal life are, making me nervous, I really enjoy escaping back, to the corridors of the ships with friends and doing things like literally exactly like this. But in terms of the characters and things, I think for me, there's always been a real core that has never shifted, and that's Ripley in particular. I think like Ripley for me has always just been this rock that I've kind of glommed onto, and I think that's an interesting case study in how it's changed for me, because when I was a kid, I really could not talk about not being able to extricate things. I really couldn't separate her from my mom. Like my mom looks a little bit like Sigourney Weaver, and she has very much the same like sort of bravery and solidity. And as a kid, I really just thought of Ripley as a mother figure for me. And it was amazing because it's like I got to watch my mom be a hero in all of these movies and do the right thing, And now as an adult myself with kids of my own, I think I look at Ripley as more of a human and less of kind of a perfect archetype, like less of like a true, cut and dried hero. And that actually makes her mean a lot more to me, because I think I see in her a lot of the flaws that I see in myself, and I see in a lot of people that I do look up to. And yet, in spite of those flaws, and often because of those flaws, she does amazing things. So I guess that's kind of in broad strokes how my relationship with Alien has changed. And I got to say, like, you're catching us at a really interesting time right now, because just like you guys, we've been very much immersed in Alien Earth, which has been interesting because it's been such like an anti-comfort food take on Alien in general. Like it's been so different and so out there and so challenging. And for the record, I really love a lot of Alien Earth, but I think it's definitely not that like go home and throw it on after school, kind of a thing. And in some ways, I really love that, and I've been kind of desperate for it. But in other ways, it's made me almost miss how simple things used to be. I feel like we've all known each other for a pretty long time now. Prometheus, for me in particular, was the first time where I really felt that sense of like proto-cataclysmic like outrage in fandom about something. And I guess maybe because the internet wasn't like a thing in my life, and I guess kind of when Resurrection came out, but not really. Like, but when Prometheus came out, it was like, wow, people get really angry about stuff that they don't like, And then every single time something's come out since then, it's happened again and again, and it makes me feel this sense of I really hope that someday we can get back to a place where we can all kind of be happy together,
Not to go down the bagging on everybody route here, but one of my earliest memories of interaction with Alien fandom was going on, I don't know if you guys will remember these, but the old mail groups that you could access via Outlook, and was going on alt.cult.movies.alien and being ready to just engage with what at this time, was a deep morbid fascination. But to find people bagging on the Alien Queen, find people bagging on aliens, and I'm talking 2000 here, 25 years ago. So I feel like it's not even just a Prometheus thing, Patrick. This is very much a every single time something new comes out thing, which is challenging in its own way, especially with what you're bringing up now. You guys have done your 20 plus interviews of Alien Earth. You talk about mixing the business with the passion, and it's hard to do that business side without the passion, isn't it? So if you're not all in on the series, going through so many interviews and spending the time and effort in your prep and your questions writing, it's difficult. It's hard work. Yeah. Anyway, Adam, would you like to do a broad strokes?
Sure. But yeah, just to kind of reflect on what you said a bit, Patrick. I mean, I definitely agree that when something you love, when business aspects kind of come into that, and it's something you have to navigate, it's always a tricky thing. I mean, even in my personal life, like I went to school for photography. I graduated in photography, and I did that because it was this art thing that I enjoy doing. But as you start working, as you work with difficult clients, you do have to balance the enjoyment of doing this creative thing with the business side of it. And if you get too far into the business side of it, it's, it's that passion that makes it worth it for people. And so it's something you always kind of have to hang on to. And it's been tricky for us to navigate too, just being honest. But to go off my own personal experience with Alien, I came to it a little bit older than Aaron did, I think. But even in some of my youngest years, I have a lot of memories of just seeing the creature around. Like, it always came back to the creature for me. And the earliest memories I can remember with it were the Kenner toys. Like, I grew up in a small Utah town, and we had a mall that had a KB toy store, if anyone remembers that. And I would always see these Kenner toys, because as long as I can remember, I was always into like sci-fi. And I think the first live action movie that could hold my attention was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so Star Wars, Jurassic Park, those were my jam when I was really little. But I would keep seeing the xenomorph here and there and just wondering what this thing was. And I remember asking my parents about it, and they're like, it's rated R, watch it when you're older, whatever. But I remember my first Kenner toy was the flying alien queen, because I just had to get this thing. I was like, this is just so crazy looking. I need it. And I would travel a lot growing up, because my parents, they both traveled a lot for work, and I would tag along with them. And I remember Disney World at former MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios, going on the Great Movie Ride, and there was the Nostromo alien segment. And I was like, what is this world that I'm now going through on this ride? Like, so I would keep running into these things. Also, I remember specifically when I was in first grade, there was this book. They were like these kids-centric books called Tales of Terror, but they were all in like R-rated movies. Well, I guess no, they had one for Jaws. But I was surprised, because they were like kids' books with graphic pictures, like bloody, gory pictures in my elementary school library, and they had one for Alien. And eventually I found one of these many years later and read it for the site. So if you're curious about that, check that out. So it wasn't until I think my early teen years that I finally got permission to watch these movies. And I saw Aliens first for whatever reason, and went back and watched Alien and then just watched all of them. And, my interest with Predator also was from Alien. And that goes back to the toys too. It, like the Kenner Predator toys, it said the ultimate alien hunter. I was like, wait, who are these guys? Like, how does this relate to Alien, right? But my parents had the idea that the Predator movies were a bit more R-rated than the Alien movies, even though it's not fully true. So I watched the Predator movies a little bit later, and I was just in love with all of them, and at this point I was just diving into the franchise, diving into the games. And that's kind of when I found AvP Galaxy. And it was because of my interest in the PC games, the AvP games, as well as the upcoming AvP film, because this was the place that I saw that had all this news about this and these rumors about this movie. And it was kind of right when I was really diving deep into this franchise that all that hype was there for AvP. And, like you, Patrick, I grew up in a small, not so small now, Utah town. And I didn't have a lot of people that shared my interest here. And so going online, finding these communities, being able to discuss these passionate interests and this escapism with friends was really core to me. And, I didn't really get involved in the site in terms of like being a part of staff until about 2011. I think I was a mod from 2011 to 2013. And then you asked me to do my first podcast, 2013, Aaron. And I remember it was Colonial Marines. And that was, I think you're muted, but you were booing it. So yeah, that was an interesting one to start, because it was something we'd been looking forward to for years and years and years that we were pretty disappointed by, I think. But going beyond that, like, so hanging out with friends online through the catalyst of video games. And this was about the same time I started talking to my current romantic partner now of like 12 years. We started talking on an art website, but we were aware of each other because we were both on AvP Galaxy. So that played a core role there for me as well. And I think after the AvP films, I'd never been as hyped for a movie as I was with Prometheus. And Prometheus, there were things I really liked about it, but it was disappointing for me personally. But it was still a movie I could really dive into with, with Natasha and with other people online. And that's when I started to become more involved with the AvP Galaxy side of things. As I've gotten older, I've been more interested in the art. I still love the gaming. Like, the games are so core to me. But also, like you said, Patrick, just the escapism with friends. Like my friend Mike, when we would do something like the Alien Descent attraction in Orange County, that was just so cool, or the 40th anniversary exhibit. And, I can see that that's how it is for you guys too. Like, I remember when we were all in line for the Alien Earth experience and you guys were just talking about your friendship and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, how this has brought us together. And it was the same with like Aaron and I, where I finally meet up with him 2017. This is like my mom and I's big Europe trip after my dad passed. And just being able to finally hang out with Aaron in person and do this like Alien Covenant experience, even though I was like disappointed in the movie, it was just still so awesome to do that with you guys and to hang out with you guys a bit. So yeah, I think it's been just such a cool experience, but still has its roads to navigate, as we've discussed a little bit. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but
no, you're good, Adam. How about you, Jamie?
Well, listening to you guys talk, definitely brings me back to like the days when I was all over the AvP Galaxy forums. I mean, that was my go-to for many, 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 many years. Just always logging in every day to see what news is coming, what people are. I mean, I remember the first time I saw the images from the set of Prometheus were on the AvP Galaxy forum, and just the wonder, like really what I remember. I think about my first exposure to aliens as a child with my dad, and I've talked about this before, but it was wonder, seeing just that moment of in black and white, because the TV was black and white, of Ripley with the incinerator just torching the eggs. That was the first moment I'd ever seen of any alien anything, and just how special that was, and yeah, just the wonder of that and how that inspired me. But then as the years went by, the world changed. Ripley's character changed for me. And, I think you guys both know this, probably everyone knows this, in terms of like feeling like Ripley saved me. I mean, we call her Space Mom for a reason. She feels very integral to who I am as a person, integral to who I am as someone who looks for truth and wants to do the right thing. I've been a whistleblower myself in a few areas of my life, and I attribute that to Ripley in many ways, also Fox Mulder and Dana Scully for sure. But yeah, it's really, really interesting. And, I have to reflect what Patrick said to some degree in terms of like the business versus the passion. And when those things collide, it's really difficult for me. Patrick knows this, like, and I've shared a little bit with Adam as well, like just the exhaustion of this coverage with Alien Earth and drumming up excitement. Not that I didn't enjoy some things in my own way, but leaving sort of the passion behind for the business. This is the first time this is really, I mean, certainly we covered Romulus like you guys did, but there's still a lot of passion for Romulus, even despite my issues with the film. But really, these films have always been a lifeline. And I think in general, sci-fi is something where I can bring my wonder. I can look at something that they're presenting to me that I've never seen before and imagine what the answers to what I'm seeing are. Imagine where they're going to take me. Imagine the lives of these people that I'm seeing. That's really what continues to capture me about Alien, specifically the original trilogy. Of course, like you guys, there are elements of Prometheus and Alien Covenant that I love. But really, these films to me are have been a way to build community. I mean, I wouldn't have met you guys if without this. You know, I mean, even back in the day, back when Resurrection was coming out, and there was only like, obviously there wasn't social media, and I was doing a monthly or a weekly newsletter called The Viper Pit, or at Play in the Viper Pit or something like that. And I would send out newsletters every week via Hotmail. And there was a ton of people who were signed up for it. And it was so exciting. And I was like, Jesus, 21 maybe at the time, maybe a little younger. I'm not really sure. But those were like the building blocks to where we are now, to where I am now. And just a sense of community and that something can bring you all together. That's why I'm here, honestly. And that's why I will stay here, is because there is something that is bringing us all together. I don't know if we can say that that's fully happening these days, but it's certainly something that I continue to hope for. So
it's funny, my undiagnosed autistic arse did not cotton on to the community kind of things when I was thinking about, you know, what I would talk about on this. But it's funny because it is such an important part of what we do, you know, you and I, all of us here, you know, what we do in terms of being places for other fans to come and share opinions and share discussions and share interpretations. And it is a lot harder to do that at the minute with the with how diverse everything seems to be that comes out. It is I think people probably don't realize how much of a challenge it is on us as moderators of those kind of discussions and stuff like that. But it is always nice.
Well,
Adam's unmuted.
Just to interject there, like, and then you can get into your tale here, Aaron. But yeah, I think both of you guys taught me kind of a valuable lesson. And because I remember when I first discovered Perfect Organism, and I was super disappointed with Covenant. I so wanted to like it after Prometheus. And I remember walking out of that second screening just being like, I don't like it. And I remember your podcast on that, Jamie, and you just railed on that movie. And I was like, yeah, fuck that movie. I should have been that hard on that movie. You tell him, Jamie. And then I remember the next podcast, you had Patrick on, who was more of a fan of the movie. And you're like, yeah, I was a bit hard on that, but I thought I would bring on someone who's more passionate about it, and we can discuss it. And I thought that was just a really cool move. And yeah, it's something I hate to see, even when there's something I don't like. You know, we're critical of it. We share our thoughts and feelings on it. I never want to stomp on what someone else likes. You know, for other people right now, they're getting into Alien through Alien Earth, or they got into it through the prequels, and people love the prequels. And I've talked to people that those are their favorite films in the franchise. I can find a lot to love about those movies, even if they don't personally resonate with me like some of the other ones in the franchise do. And that's okay. Like, we can be respectful about that. I think that's something to keep in mind. And unfortunately, the internet, especially these days, can be a very disrespectful place. But it doesn't have to be that way with disagreement and stuff. So, but it is a challenge sometimes to keep things civil.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's about behaving as we want other people to interact with us as well. So, you know, it's very important to have that respectful disagreement, shall we say. And it's why I always like to point out the quiet minority of these things, you know, the people who are voting but not necessarily commenting, and negativity is a lot louder in not necessarily a vacuum, because I don't think the fandoms are quite a vacuum, but, you know, it is just louder in general.
Actually, just a super quick thing on that, Aaron, is on AvP Galaxy after Covenant came out. I'll never forget this. You guys did a poll, you know, in the sidebar, and you said, you know, was it successful? And 76% of people said it was. And this was at a time when the amount of bullying that I was getting for enjoying Covenant was like making me leave the internet. I mean, it's literally why I'm not on social media very much, is because it was just such a bad experience. And yet that poll like was a very clear majority of people actually enjoyed the movie, but you would never know it because the way that people interact online is just so vitriolic all the time, you know, and people who are angry get so much, you know, airspace. And I think it happens.
Yeah. And it's why I actually find the aggregators relatively important in terms of discussions. You know, places like the audience scores and audience comments from like Metacritic, from Rotten Tomatoes, from IMDb. You know, it's the people that are there to leave a quick comment, but don't want to delve into everything. And I think their voices are just as important as people like us who put the time and effort into doing things like these. So it's all we live in complicated times, and it's a hard act to balance. But you know what wasn't complicated was the sheer fucking terror that I endured from aliens. Which is why, sorry, that was me segueing into my story here. So I, unlike Adam, would say my father was quite irresponsible in letting me watch Aliens the day before my 5th birthday. This is how vividly I remember this. So we'd gone to a theme park called American Adventure. Stereotypical American stuff and attractions, the westerns, the cowboys, the Native Americans, all that kind of stuff. But they had a motion cinema thing. On the outside of it was, your stereotypical busts of your classic West American stuff. But there was one with a facehugger on it. There was one with Vasquez's bandana on it. One with like a generic sort of marine helmet on it. And they were showing something in there called Aliens Ride at the Speed of Fright, which was a very dodgy 20-minute experience in which you were part of a team that was heading down to an infested alien colony, an infested colony with a bunch of Marines, and you're in a dropship and your seats were moving and you're getting an APC and you're starting to drive and again, the seats are moving and all that kind of stuff. For the longest time, I thought I'd made that up. I thought that was a fake memory because I could never, ever see anybody else talking about that on any of the communities, any of the forums, any of the mail groups that I was a part of. And it wasn't until Charles de Lauzarica threw it on the Alien Anthology box set in 2010 that I was like, this is a real memory. This actually happened. But yeah, sorry. So watching that, coming out of that, my dad says to me, I've got the film that's based on at home if you want to watch it. Yeah, it was not a good idea. It was not a good idea at all. Again, vividly remembering watching it in the ad breaks of Sky One's showing of the pilot episode of Star Trek Voyager, flicking between the VHS, flicking between Sky One. And we got up to just after the first chest burst scene in Aliens specifically. And I just absolutely fucking shit my pants. I was like, turn it off. I can't deal with this anymore. In whatever, 4-year-old vernacular. Oh, we've just lost Patrick there. In whatever 4-year-old vocabulary I was using at the time. It resulted in literal 5 years of nightmares. I slept face down on my bed for 5 years, youth logic being, oh, if there's something against my chest, a chest burster cannot come out. And it was this absolute morbid fascination to do with the alien, to do with the life cycle, to do with the way it made me feel. And that was, I eventually got over it a little bit when I accidentally walked in on my dad watching the film or putting the film on around 10 years old. So yeah, 5 years later, I walked in on him, putting it on. I about faced, was like, nope, not doing this. Because we tried to watch it again at some point when I was like 7 years old or something. And I got to the same point and it had to be turned off again. So he says, no, you get back in here and you watch this film right now. Because I think he was probably sick of the nightmares, sick of the fascination, sick of the questions throughout those intervening years. And it wasn't just that as well. It was the Game Alien trilogy. I remember sitting behind the settee watching my dad play that on our Sega Saturn, not quite being brave enough to see the aliens on the screen and everything like that. I couldn't even pick up the box of the game because I was that terrified of it. So it was him making me actually sit down and watch the film that led it a little way from terror and that kind of thing. It was still morbid fascination, but it was not so much terror. But that was a high I sort of chased a lot throughout the intervening years, was the physical reaction it had on me. AvP Classic, that was a game that used to terrify the shit out of me. Still after having watched the films, I'd have been about 10, 11. and I just couldn't play the Colonial Marine missions. I couldn't do it. I didn't have the stones for it. I had to play the Predator missions so I could have the vision mode on, so I could clearly see them in the darkness. I had to play as the alien, you know, so I was playing as my nightmare rather than facing against it. But you know, as you learn more about the way movies are made and the way it was all put together and the artwork behind it, I got less scared of it. So I was still chasing that high, and that was why Alien Isolation is so important to me, because one of my vivid memories of that is the first time I ever got to play it. I remember sitting down in Creative Assembly in Horsham on these fucking gaming chairs that were the thing at the time, in this really dark room with these headphones on. One of the other lads from the website was on the opposite TV across from me, and I just remember coming out of that room having to have a moment outside of it. You know, I had to be to the press girl to just give me a second here, and I had to have an adrenaline come down in there. It's why the VR game, it's why Rogue Incursion, I'm so fond of it, you know, because that's a whole other experience that brings back the physical reaction to it, brings back the fear. You know, you are literally there looking up at the aliens themselves, and that's a really interesting feel. But I empathize a lot more with the corporate nightmare that is represented throughout various aspects of the film, the expanded media, and even Alien Earth. You know, as I have gone through my own career trajectory and come across a multitude of different people and situations and organizational changes and everything like that, I now just look at a lot of aspects of Alien and appreciate those maybe more subtle elements at the start of the franchise, but you know, they are very much brought to the forefront in a lot of things recently. You know, it's why I like Romulus so much. I adore that film. I'm very passionate about that film. I hold it on the same sort of pedestal as I do Alien 3, where it's a flawed film where I would have done things very differently, or some things very differently were either created behind it, but it's a film I fucking adore. One of the reasons for that is the plight of the characters, is this concept of being born into a situation that they did not ask for, a social situation that they did not ask for. And I'm not going to pretend to be like born into poverty here, but I sort of had to fall into the line of what my parents did, because that was the opportunities that were afforded to me through their own connections, their own abilities to help guide me and stuff like that. So that's something with Romulus that I'm really like, yes, I see you. I see myself in these people. And even Alien Earth, and I fear I'm about to enter my villain arc here, but I saw, because it's not consistent throughout the series, you know, you guys all know this, but like the moment where Morrow is talking about his motivations for why he's still going to go after the aliens in episode 3, I think it is, led to me discovering this thing called the sunk cost fallacy. You know, it is literally all he has left. And I'm in a professional situation now where somebody asked me, why the fuck are you still here? Why are you still doing this, given how much you complain about it? And I was like, well, I don't want to see the last 10 years of my life go to waste.
Was it me asking you about that, or do multiple people ask you about
it? Oh, no, I was asked about that at work, because I said something to the wider team, and they were like, why the fuck are you still always there? So that led to me learning about the sunk cost fallacy and seeing myself in Morrow. And then even things like Boy K, you know, when he is in that scene with Utani. And one of the things I read in that scene is his disdain for the bureaucracy that they have to play to. You know, that's the rules of their situation. That is the reality of their situation. And Boy K is making a mockery of it in that boardroom scene. And I was like, yep. I see myself there too. So, and there's a little bit in between there, you know, Dallas and Hicks. You know, Hicks, I chose him when I was 12 as my alias. for no particular reason other than he was the cool Marine, the cool male lead Marine. And, you know, I'm still at that age where I appreciate the explosions and the military hardware and all that kind of stuff. But as I got older and found myself in middle management, I found myself in being responsible for things that I didn't want to be. Why am I got to be the guy you're going to call up when a riot's going to happen because of this one thing failing? You know, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be responsible for staff. You know, I ended up having to train and deploy people on a daily basis, and it was just because the guy above me got promoted, so I was up to fill his shoes. And so I saw a lot of myself in Dallas, you know, in being in charge of these things he didn't want to. So that's where I changed a lot of the ways, is just appreciating this corporate nightmare that Alien and the later media represented. It's why I like Alex White's stuff a lot as well, because they really amp up that sort of ineptitude of corporate structure, of the callousness of your managers and things like that. Wendy as well, her nightmare of being owned by her, you know, being owned by the Prodigy Corporation. I'm fortunate enough not to be treated that way, but I have known a lot of managers who will, if you do not live and breathe this company, get fucked. And I see that in her sort of worry in Alien Earth. There's something else as well, and I can't remember what it is. Oh, yeah. Rogue Incursion. So there's a lot in that about healthcare and in the logs in terms of healthcare and how they are treated, how the staff are treated and bribed and manipulated by their access to healthcare. You guys live this nightmare. I fear this nightmare with the way certain people are going over in our politics. And I always say, you know, I would rather be left for dead than fucking alive with all this debt. And that is something Alex has put into Rogue Incursion, and is something I genuinely fear for my future. So that is, it's on the negative side, really, but it's what I now find very appealing about the Alien franchise, is that particular dystopian corporate nightmare of it all. That's my piece.
I love so much of what you said, and I think the parts of Rogue Incursion that work the best for me are definitely things like that Alex brought to the story that I think get at the evils of what capitalism can bring, and I think just also Alex White, I think in general, is just really nails a lot of these themes and a lot of their work, and I really hope that we get more with them. And before getting back to characters for a second, I also want to go back to something that's come up a few times, which is the expanded universe and how consistently important that has been in my life. Because as a kid, I couldn't watch the movies all the time. Like sometimes you have to not watch the movies, right? And then, but I always had the comics and I always had the toys. I mean, the toys, to Adam's point, everybody knows this about me. Like, in AvP Galaxy, I was the gorilla alien. Like, they're huge to me. Like, I still have my original set of Kenner toys behind me. All the KB toys repaints. I have Kenner, nice Scorpion. I have Kenner tattoos. Like, I really, to me, that was enormous. And I've said this story in many places, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but the moment I knew I loved Alien was when I was 7 and my friend brought a gorilla alien action figure to the playground. And I was like, well, that's the coolest fucking thing I'm ever going to see in my life. And I just instantly was just hooked, What's cool is that the creature for me has always been obviously monumentally important. I mean, as you can see behind me and blah, blah, I really surround myself with the xenomorph. And I think that the XX-121 is the best monster ever made. And I think it's one of those things that I'm never going to get tired of talking about, looking at, drawing, discussing, sculpting. It's just a huge thing in my life. But what I do love is that there's all these other stories that gradually became just as important to me the older I got. The Dark Horse era, in particular, like being a kid during the Dark Horse era, was such an amazing time, because like you would go to the comic store and there would always be new weird shit. There'd be new. We can swear on this, right? Yeah, I thought so.
I say far worse. Don't worry.
Okay. There would always be new compendiums and new collected editions of trade paperbacks, but also just new issues and new one-offs and one shots. And it was just such a wild, interesting time, because you just never knew what you were going to get. And I think part of why I have been somewhat less calcified in my opinions on things as an adult comes from always having them challenged as a kid, because I always just saw wild new takes on what Alien can be. And so I was kind of like brought up with this idea that like Alien can mean a lot of different stuff, and you can do a lot of different things with this, and that was always something that I found really, really exciting. And honestly, it's not until we're talking now that I'm realizing this about myself, that I think part of why when Covenant came out, for example, and I was so happy with so much of it, like it had literally, it had, I'm not even exaggerating, it had nothing to do with me thinking it was a perfect film. Like it had zero to do with me being like, oh, this is an unimpeachably great movie where, I wouldn't change a thing about it. Like it had nothing to do with that. The second I saw Covenant, I was like, oh, there's a lot of problems in that movie. But the things that I loved about it, I was so excited about. And I was so scared in the movie theater. And I thought my mind was just going about this whole idea of David being this kind of, harkening back to like the romantic creative era in humanity, and just this idea of like, what if what makes us human isn't our ability to procreate, but our ability to create? Like, what if it's this, it just made me ask a lot of really cool questions, which made me feel like I was reading a Dark Horse story, and with Romulus as well. Like I have issues with that movie, but I still watch that. I watch that more than any of the other ones, partly because my kids love Romulus, but also because it's just a really fun movie to watch. And it makes me feel like I'm going back to those old days of picking up a serial adventure or picking up a one-off novel, and just losing myself in these new characters and this new setting, and seeing this different take on Alien that feels very comforting, but also tries some new stuff out. And with Alien Earth, which again, I by and large love. I mean, I think the characters are incredible in Alien Earth. I was just along for the ride. And I think something that I have issues with sometimes is I don't like when people don't give things chances. Like I think if you don't like something, that's completely fine, and like you're more than entitled to express that opinion. But I don't like when you haven't even gotten the full story yet, and people come to these really kind of like specific, like this is not my Alien opinions on things. Kind of like, well, how do you know yet? And I think growing up with all the Dark Horse comics and growing up gaming my brains out. I mean, the video games were such a huge part of my childhood. Whether we're talking about the AvP games, I played that on multiple platforms when AvP came out for the Jaguar. Like I still to this day play that game. I mean, I had the Atari 2600 Pac-Man clone. I mean, I've played every single entry.
Patrick, so old.
To be fair, I got that only like 15 years ago. That was I didn't have a 2600 as a kid, but I really, I mean, the Resurrection game on PlayStation, like that's an incredible piece of Doom clone fun. That me and my sister would stay up all night. Like we would be told it was time to go to bed, and then I would like knock on my sister's bedroom door, and I'd be like, Claire, let's go out and play. And then we play this Resurrection game together. And she'd be sitting with me, and she'd be like having her little notebook out, with like Minnie Mouse on the cover. And she'd be like taking notes on where we left off. It's just, to me, like those experiences are so fun. And I think it really inspired and inculcated in me this idea that we try to give things chances because we don't know what they're going to do to us. We don't know what kind of new things are going to happen. And I think it's really fun when something new comes out to just sort of surrender yourself to the possibility of maybe falling in love with a new story,
Mm-hmm. So just as a little aside from what you were brought up there about Resurrection, the game.
Yeah.
So one of the things I will always harp about is the impact of aliens on science fiction, on military science fiction as a, as a genre. But just to go more specific here. So in that regard, sorry, I'm a big fan of Halo, of the franchise, and Alien and Predator are all over Halo. So just to go specific into Resurrection here, that game at the time was heavily critiqued for the control scheme, the way you would use one analog stick to move, one analog stick to move around. Cut to 2-3 years later, Halo popularizes that exact control scheme as the way that FPS controls should work on a console, and Alien Resurrection did it many years before, or several years before. I forget the exact time frame there, but
it's such an underrated piece of gaming history to me. And again, like I have, in terms of the expanded universe, I mean, I've read every novel that's come out, I've read every comic that's come out, I've done all these things because to me, like, regardless of if I love a movie or not, like the expanded universe is just always there. And I think before I found this kind of community, in my adulthood, there was a sense as a kid, like reading these new comics that came out, etc., that like there was a community out there, that there were people all over the world who were just as into this wild thing as I was. And I think that's something I just love.
I absolutely agree. Without the expanded universe, I would not be as passionately invested in the franchise as I am. It was, again, going back to the age of me being terrified, me being into all the Lovecraftian horror elements of Alien. It was a deep fascination with the space jockey. It was me wanting to learn more about this thing. And it led to me hunting down. Everything was much harder when I was a kid. Amazon and Play 247, I think it were at the time. I think it's just play.com now. Were like the places I went to try and find stuff. And it was hard to find comics and books and stuff as easily as it is now on Amazon. And it took me ages, but I eventually hunted down a copy of Aliens, Apocalypse, The Destroying Angels, and AvP Prey at some point. But it was specifically hunting down those expanded universe elements and the effort that went into that led to me being more willing to then try the other comics and try the other bits and pieces. And I think you make a very good point that the fans that were brought up on the comics and the EU are more willing to give the wackier stuff a go. So like everything that's going off now with Wendy and communicating with the aliens, my first thought was, oh, that's just Eloise from Aliens Purge, from AvP Pursuit. So the entire concept I'm already familiar with. My problem is the presentation in the show.
And Earth Wars too. There's actually a lot of precedent for that.
Yeah, through Nightmares and all that. Not so much the communication aspect. I'm thinking more the synthetic communicating, controlling the aliens kind of thing. I mean, the aliens' communication throughout the EU is entirely fascinating. Even aliens' use of dreams specifically is a whole other fucking topic that should be explored, especially given the way the illustrated screenplay opens up, which was a quote from one of the drafts, which was we live as we dream alone. So and the professional dreamers in the novelization, Alan Dean Foster's thing that he adds to it. So dreams is a whole other thing in Aliens that somebody out there should explore at some point, and is actually on my list of shit to do things about. But no, I do agree with you. I think it opens up a willingness to give them a go. And I also think a lot of that is also due to familiarity with something. So, the longer something can sit with you, the more use you get to it and the more willing you'll be able to give it an honest sort of experience. And to be fair, that's something that can be a little easier for us who might be privy to certain intel well before things. So you come to accept those kind of things. And it's something, just to go into the Predator side of things, I'm sorry, guys. But like Deck's new appearance in that film, it's got to the point, the initial reaction is, oh, that's weird. I don't know if I like that. And then after a certain point where you get used to it, it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now it's just another interpretation. That's fine. So, it is a willingness to sit with things. It is a willingness to consider things after the fact, rather than this is my response and this is going to be my response for ages. You are allowed to reconsider things. You're allowed to bring different interpretations into things based on your experiences going forwards. Reconsidering things is a vital part of text. After all, it's how we learn.
Yeah, we won't be able to fit everything in terms of our journey with these franchises into this podcast, but art was a huge part of it for me. Before I went into photography, I was an illustration major, and around that time I was still very much into Alien. But that was when I really dived into H.R. Giger's books and started looking through those. And then I finally got to go to his museum in 2017. So just the art side of things, and film has always been something I've been very interested in and passionate about as well. And that was kind of a core experience with the franchise for me growing up, was when my dad got me that Alien Quadrilogy DVD set, and I unfolded it all and I went through all the special features. And I learned a lot about filmmaking and in these films in particular that I had never seen before. And also the comics. I mean, I remember I used to work on the ski lift at the Sundance Resort in the summers, and we were encouraged to read books because it wasn't quite as busy as it was in the winter. And that was around the time that we got all the Dark Horse omnibus ones. And I had had a few of the graphic novels before. Like, I remember there was this store I loved in San Francisco called Things from Another World. And I think that's where I got some of my first Alien graphic novels. But I just burned through all these Dark Horse omnibus books from front to back while I was on that ski lift working in the summer. And yeah, that got me even deeper into things. But Jamie, how about you? I mean, you've talked about really connecting with these characters. Is the expanded universe something that is important for you, or are you kind of more focused on the core films?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think this is something that comes up a lot when we talk about on our show, where I'm not a games guy. I'm not an expanded universe guy. Not that I don't have appreciation for that stuff. I really do. I mean, I've bought the comics. I've read the comics. I've enjoyed them. Specifically, I always fuck up this name, Red, White, and Blood. Black. What was that?
Black, White, and Blood. Black, White, and Blood.
Black, White, and Blood. I thought that was
fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was
Hell
really,
yeah.
really good. I am definitely a purist for sure. Whether that's to my own detriment it remains to be seen. But I really appreciate like the novels that Alex White wrote. I've read not all of it, but the first one, which was Into Charybdis, I believe. Or was that the second one? The first one was what?
Cold Forge.
Okay. No, so I read Cold Forge. I did not read Into Charybdis. And I appreciate everything that Alex wrote. I mean, I appreciate the fandom surrounding those books and the expanded universe as well. And I think, Aaron, you bring up a good point. I mean, that you can, as fans of the expanded universe, when you see stuff like in Alien Earth, Wendy talking to the xenomorph, you can understand some context of that. You're like, okay, I've seen that before. I've never seen that before. I was aware that it existed. I've been told and informed by other people in fandom, Patrick being one of them, that, hey, this was something that had happened before. It's very, very interesting. I think it's a little harder for me being a film guy to see some of the things that I'm seeing in the show, or not just the show, but I think about Alien Earth and I think about Romulus, and I think Alien Earth has given me a more of appreciation for Romulus than I would have had before. And I mean, just being honest, my opinion on Alien Earth is deteriorating. Not that I think it's a terrible thing. I enjoyed what I enjoyed. I thought the characters were great, but I'm just not gripped by it. And I just think it's, by the end of it, I was like, yeah, okay. I don't think about it at all. I have been processing that for a while. Even processing, how do I have these conversations with people that I'm not gripped by the show? And I think some of it was keeping the excitement going so that I could get through the interviews, You
see, that is a massive point that people probably don't realize about what we do, is the passion to get through that kind of stuff, things we're not necessarily passionate about. So like I don't want to expend energy on the prep for these interviews about projects I don't like, so that's my bias that gets in the way of stuff that we cover, that we approach, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think people appreciate that. And it's a fair point, Jamie.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And it's, again, I'm always processing how I feel about things, what I think about things. I'm still processing Romulus in some really important ways, because initially we came out really critical about that film. That was, our infamous 3:30 in the morning recording of our reactions to Romulus. We were all across the board really critical. And then to the points everyone's making, things have changed. And I think as I process, as I get older and I continue covering this stuff, because as you guys know, we have a Romulus 2 on the way. The cameras start rolling in maybe spring or something. That's something that I'm excited about. But I think it is hard as these things come out, as we cover these things, someone myself who is so passionate, as I know you guys are as well, to think, oh, hey, I like this, I like this, I like this, but not love everything. That is hard for me to do. But I'm also a fan of nuance. I'm a total fan of nuance. I think you can love things in ways like that aren't black and white. And so many times, especially in fandom, people ask you, did you love it? Was it great? Or was it bad? I hear that question all the fucking time. And I am so sick of it. Because life is not like the life that we live. We can have great days. We can have challenging days with great things in them. We can have horrible days with some great things in those horrible days. And that's how I view, and that's how I approach film. I think I'm myself personally a little bit exhausted with something that I don't love from beginning to end. And I was talking about this with Mike Andrews, actually. And he used the term, this sort of dulling of our senses, and that he's felt like some things dull our senses after a while. And but also the idea that Alien hasn't had a win, hasn't had a moment since 1986, where everyone loved it. Not to say that there aren't people who don't like, not like the Queen or whatever, but generally you can say everyone loves Alien and Aliens. I understand, but there has not been a film that everyone has loved since that time. And that to me is really disappointing. And I'm processing that. Like, I'm processing, is this something that I get over? How do I do this? Like, how do I continue this being so excited about something and then watching it and being like, okay, all right, that was interesting. You know, like for instance, episode 5 of Alien Earth, I wanted to fucking love that episode. And I thought it was the worst episode of the entire season. I thought it was awful. Even though I thought it was beautiful and it conjured Alien in the way no one else has conjured it before, in terms of the way the Nostromo looked, those sets, it was just beautiful. Like, they hit that out of the park, but then they didn't, in my perspective, hit out of the park the characters or the dialogue. It was overwrought. It was overwritten. It was it was just too much of everything. And I'm tired of feeling this way about things. But we love what we love and we don't love what we don't love. So the future is something like I'm really excited about now that Alien Earth is over, that Patrick and I and the rest of the team, but certainly Patrick and I, can retreat to what's wonderful, which retreat to what's across the board agreed upon as wonderful, so that I can revive my love for this series or for this franchise. Because right now, like, as the days go by, I'm just like, man, I don't like that. I just didn't like the show. It's just the show. I left, even with Romulus, I left gripped. I was left gripped from Romulus, even with my issues with that show, with that movie. And by the end of Alien Earth, I was like, I'm not gripped by this show whatsoever. I don't even care about it. I don't care about it season 2. But I'm also weighing, like, because we've been covering the show since February, nonstop, that's what's informing me, because I don't know right now, and I can't come down in any way like I'm hardlined on this. I can't do that because I don't have. I'm trying to remove like the business side from the passion side, and right now they're so intertwined. I don't know what's real, but I do know that I'm just completely bored to death with the show, and that's not how I want to feel as an alien. As a part of fandom, as a podcasting fandom like you are, yeah, it's a tough place to be, and I hate being in these places. But it's funny because I think about this, and with Covenant, I was in a really tough place with that movie, and then I met Patrick, and Patrick, you know, of course, been on the show for 8.5 years or longer, and I have a lot of love for that movie now. I can put Covenant on and watch it and enjoy it. And I never would have thought I'd been able to do that before. So I'm trying to keep like the doors open, my doors of my heart open, the passion open. But it's a tough thing. But I do want to say, unrelated, Perfect Organism started off with one conversation I had with you, Aaron. And when Neil Blomkamp announced Alien 5, I reached out to you and sent you a text saying, is there an Alien podcast anywhere? And you're like, well, we have a show. But then I was like, well, but specifically solely Alien. And you're like, no, there isn't. I was like, okay, I know that there's a gap there that I can start something else. So I attribute much of Perfect Organism, I tribute to some conversations that I had in New Year's, being one of them, Aaron. Anyways,
I remember, because I always felt like a fucking fool about it. I remember you having a post where you were asking about something to do with podcasts, and I replied saying, "Oh, well, you do this, you do that, you do this," and you went, "No, that's not what I meant, you fucking idiot." In brackets. And that is something I always remember about you starting that. But no, I didn't remember that. I didn't know.
Yeah, that was a private message I had with you somewhere. Yeah.
Well,
anyways, it's a mixed bag, and
it's a space that, you know, we find ourselves in sometimes, and just being disappointed with things. And I remember I felt that way again with Prometheus. Like, oh, is this what Alien is now? Like, what is this? And after The Predator, you know, I flew out to Toronto. I went to this premiere where some really negative news of the movie had dropped the day of, and it was my first premiere, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to get the best coverage I could at this crazy event. And then I see the movie, and I was just like, oh, man, that was like complete victim of like studio meddling. And I remember walking back to the hotel and talking to my girlfriend and just being like, oh yeah, it really wasn't very good. Like, and just like that feeling of disappointment. But again, I had a lovely time in Toronto. I had a lovely time with a friend from the site that I got to meet up in person with there. So, and I still have a lot of appreciation for the work that even with that movie went into. I want to see an alternate cut for that movie. And to your point, Jamie, not everything's black and white. A lot of things are just shades of gray. And I think too often a lot of people, and maybe ourselves included at times, are tempted to look at things in that black and white perspective. And yeah, we love what we love, and we don't like what we don't like, but opinions can change. Things can be reevaluated. And even with Covenant, like when I was disappointed with that, Aaron, but when I met up with you guys and we got to do that experience, I was like, oh, it's cool. Like going through the world of this movie, and at that exhibit as well, seeing all these crazy props, like, oh, look at this spacesuit they did for this movie. This is so cool. And there's things about Covenant that I've really appreciated, like the dark gothic tone. I remember even seeing the movie because I was so into Giger's art at the time, where they had the Isle of the Dead just recreated in that movie. I was like, that's so fucking cool that they just threw that in there. So even with things that we might not feel is like we love, like to your point, Jamie, I think we can still find things that we love there. Now, granted, Alien has felt divisive for a long time, and I think it's led to some frustration with fans. But even I remember the first time I saw Alien 3, I was like, oh, they killed those characters? Like, what were they thinking? Like, what was that? Like who approved this? And then seeing the assembly cut, watching all the behind the scenes, seeing all the frustration that even the filmmakers had with this thing, really led to that turning in from dislike to love. Like, I love Alien 3. Same with Resurrection. Like, Resurrection, I never really hated. I kind of dismissed it at first, maybe. Like, oh, there's some cool effects there, but it's really kind of dumb or whatever. But that movie I came to love through the years, seeing a lot of the artistry there. So I think where we are in our lives, like, things can change. And again, speaking to the business things, like, we've never been this busy covering all this stuff and what we're doing now. And the business side of things, I know you were very hesitant when we started that, Aaron, but it comes to a point where you have more and more responsibilities demanded on you the older you get. And my point was like, do we want to keep devoting the time that we're doing to this that we are now? Because that's going to be necessary if that's the case. So it's a way we can, I guess, stay connected to what we love doing to this stuff. Kind of at that same level we were when we were younger. But yeah,
I miss having that energy from being younger.
But I've been asked by people like, hey, don't you get sick of Alien? Like, sometimes. And sometimes I have to stop and think and be like, do I get sick of Alien? Even though I have to stop and think about it, the answer is always no. I'm always going to be interested in the next thing that they're doing. I may get sick of one particular thing. But no, there's always going to be something that was very core there that connected with me. And I think that's probably the case for all of us, even with the space you're in, Jamie, now. At least I would hope so.
So two things there, and I'm going to have to make sure I try and remember them here. Jamie, what you were saying about you know covering this from February. I think, and this is not just exclusive to Alien, I feel like we are overloaded as audiences now, overwhelmed as audiences now. There's a lot of everything gets dropped. You've got to watch this season within this time span to be a part of this conversation that's happening everywhere, thanks to fucking Facebook. I fucking hate Facebook, but so it's overwhelming in that sense because of FOMO. And then we're now at this point where I can't believe I'm saying this, but where it's like there's too much coming out, even for like Alien. Too many books, too many comics. These productions of the film and then the TV show and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes it is tiresome, especially when you've got passions elsewhere as well that you're trying to balance. You're trying to balance life. So that's certainly a aspect of this that can be difficult, is that feeling of overwhelming. And I've completely forgot my second part about what we were just talking about. So no, it's gone. It's gone. I'm sorry.
That's getting older right there for you.
Yeah.
I know.
If it comes back, just interrupt me. But I think for me, and I was just saying this in our chat over in the side, that the overwhelming thing is more just this sense of like knowing that drama is gonna happen like all the time. Like that's being honest, has been very difficult for me. Like because I know when something comes out, it's just going to like be a big fight for some reason. And I think I don't know, like part of me just remembers being a kid and seeing like the special edition of Aliens VHS, and bringing that home and just sitting there and like being so lost in it and not having to think at all about what anyone else's opinion is on the movie whatsoever. And the difference now is like I am bazookaed with opinions all the time from every angle of my life. I mean, even though I try to avoid, being on Facebook for example, very much, I do moderate our subreddit, which is now almost 3.5 thousand people. And that's like, another area where people are just constantly just sharing opinions. And again, it's great. Like it's good. We do this partly to share opinions with each other, right? But it becomes overwhelming, especially because in the world we live in now, I think we all miss that feeling of getting that special edition VHS and bringing it home on a Friday night and sitting there with popcorn with your cousins and your siblings and watching something and screaming and throwing popcorn everywhere. And now it's like it's so intense all the time. It's like everything has to succeed or it failed. And I just miss just like seeing something and just talking to people, and then it's kind of done and you move on with your life. I mean, because even now, people that I love very dearly in my life who are not watching the live streams with us every week in and out, they're still, as the days go on, catching up on the series, and they're all so I wake up and I still have messages and voicemails for people, sharing their opinions about it. And I do want to be clear that I do love getting that, but I do just feel overwhelmed sometimes. Like so I'm leaving some of these things unread because I just kind of like can't. I just kind of can't talk about it anymore. So yeah, to James' point, I'm excited to go back in the coming weeks to some of the older things that are a little bit easier to digest and a little more kind of agreed upon. But I do live with this feeling of like, and I'll shut up in a second, but just briefly, something that I've noticed a lot that differs between me and Jamie is you historically seem more excited about when things get announced that they're happening, and that's something with Christian and we used to talk about too. And I'm like never quite as excited about new things being announced. And I think it's, although I'm like a deeply optimistic person, I think I'm also just a tired person in some ways. And like I really love what we've got, and I kind of just don't want to have this like explosion of negativity and divisiveness and things like that and it just kind of keeps happening. And I can't really think of like I know Andor is going to come up because Andor was a masterpiece and everybody loves it, but like it's very rare that everyone agrees on something being great. And if you look in the realm of like Hollywood mainstream films, that is like 0%. I mean, there's like nothing that comes out now where everybody's like unimpeachable, great masterpiece, did the exact right amount of, callbacks without doing callbacks, was also new, but also not too new, was exciting and really well written and underacted, but acted enough. There's like nothing like that. And a movie that is like that, something like Blade Runner 2049, people complain about that on the internet all the time, and we get a lot of mail about that for Shoulder of Orion. And that's a movie where like, how could you do a better job than that? I mean, that's like the perfect sequel to an unsequelable film made by like one of the great directors of our time. And people still are like pissed about it, and it's been almost a decade. So I just have this sense of like, I don't know how we get back to Aliens coming out in '86 and everybody kind of being like, oh, this is awesome.
And to your point there, yeah, even when things do have that level of acclaim, they have their detractors, and that's okay. There's things like, there's movies a lot of people love that I don't. There's movies that everybody dislikes that I like. But even with Prey, you know, whatever one or two nitpicks we had on that, Aaron, we were just like, incredible, literally saved the Predator franchise. Thank you for making this movie. But that movie still has its, you know, people that get online and they're just like, oh, it stinks.
Patrick, you bring up a I remembered what I wanted to say. I've written it in the private chat now. But just to your point there, you know, about the sharing of opinions, what I miss about discourse is people seem to be, and Sarah brought this up in the chat, you know, a little bit, is people are more interested in being right about their opinions. Their opinions are the de facto, this is the correct way to view this thing. And what I miss about discourse is learning other people's interpretations and discussing that. You know, this person sees this in this, and spinning off into a conversation about why that's interesting. You know, like you, Jamie, you know, the whistleblower thing. That is not my view of Ripley. And until you brought that up in your own chat, I was like, this is fucking fascinating. And I see where he's coming from, and I can see this. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to learn. I want conversations where, you know, it's not black and white. It is nuanced, because life is fucking nuanced. So that's what I miss. Stop telling me why I'm right or I'm wrong, or you're right or you're wrong, and let's have nuanced discussions without devolving into calling each other bastards about it. Go ahead, Jamie.
I just wanted to, I think to your point, Aaron, what's really divisive, and this is something Patrick and I have really noticed recently, is it's not so much that people have differing opinions. It's oftentimes the people who are very critical, you must agree with me, and you are stupid for having another opinion. It's that like energy that's, and it's being disseminated everywhere. Everything, this is how it is. And if you like this, you are stupid for liking this. And that's something that's changed a little bit in fandom, where before maybe people had differing opinions, but now it's turning into something more insidious, something more toxic, where people feel like they have to be right, and I am right, and the way that I'm viewing this is right, and you are wrong. And it creates these lines in the sands. And it's just more divisiveness. It's just something that's fascinating, and just, it's such a bummer to me. It just shuts down conversation, and it's like, well, I don't even want to engage with you anymore. If I can't have my opinions because you think that they're stupid, and I have to think that yours are right. This happens all over the internet, and with people that we love too, people that we know, and it's been a trip. Yeah, very challenging.
So something Adam brought up, and just sort of related to where this conversation has gone, I guess, is Adam was talking about when he went to see the Predator, and it was a fucking shit experience for him. And when I first saw Alien Romulus, the experience was terrible for me. You know, I was in the bottom left of this giant IMAX screen, and I could see fuck all, and I could hear fuck all. I didn't know what was going off. I came out of the film absolutely livid. I hated it. It was the fucking worst alien film I'd ever seen. And it's the willingness to change that initial perception that I think makes a difference to a lot of things as well. So I went to see it with Chevy on release date, and he was asking me opinions on the film, and I was like, I'm not going to tell you how I feel about it. Make your own mind up when we get in there, and I'm going to sit along and I'm going to watch it with you. And I came out of that film with an absolute fucking smile on my face, like just absolute joy at the end of that film when I actually got to experience it properly, you know, sat in the middle of the screen. And so I think there needs to be a willingness to also change perception, and a willingness to listen to other people's perceptions as well, which I'm glad I get to change my thoughts on things. I'm glad that new stuff coming out, lets me look at other entries in the past in different ways. And I guess we see this in a bad way at the minute. What's it called when new things come out, where you go back and revisit the old ones and you go, actually, that wasn't that bad. And I feel like
nostalgic way,
or reevaluating.
I believe there's a terminology for it. Like specifically, like a new film comes out, everybody thinks that's shit, so they go back and rewatch the last one, and they go, "Oh, it wasn't actually that bad." We see that a lot now, at the minute. There's always articles about it where something's come out, the viewership numbers for this other thing have gone off the sky, off the charts, and people are now tweeting about it, saying how much they loved it. It happened with the prequels around Romulus time, to be honest, and I feel like it's always done in a negative way, where it's like, this thing's so shit that this other thing that we said was shit before isn't actually as bad as we thought it was. And I hate that framing of it, but the willingness to go back and revisit things is something that I think is important and that we should enjoy. It should be a case of we're watching these things in anticipation and, oh, this is actually pretty cool. This thing I didn't notice before, this aspect I didn't think about before. Oh, this is interesting with this new thing in context. That's the fun. That's the fun of it. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to say there?
No, I think it's just a very important, healthy thing to be able to reflect and reevaluate one's own position on things, and that might not change, but just that act of being open to that change, I think is important. And yeah, unfortunately, and I hope we don't veer too into the negative reflections on things happening today, but there is too much vitriol online. Just recently we shared like a really charming piece of fan art for the series, and people thought, oh, the comment section is where I'm going to take my hate for the series, for this piece of fan art. And I'm like, really, guys? Like, I don't care if you don't like the show. Like, let people enjoy things, as the old meme says. But regardless, there's always these things we come back to. Like, for me, it's always going to be the games. Those early memories of high school and my early 20s when we would get on AvP 2010, Aaron, and that would always be like, I would come home from school and I would.
It's a great game.
A very great game. We're going to be playing that after this podcast, actually. So that's been a space of escapism that I can go to with friends, and even new friends like you guys, going through. I think in-person experiences are always, as much as our friendship relies on the internet. I think in-person experiences are always going to be so much better. They were important for us, Aaron, what little we had of them. And I think they were great for us at SDCC recently when we got to go through this cool walk through alien thing together. And I had to do we had to do a whole podcast on these alien themed experiences, just because that's one of my favorite things, is when they set up these things that really throw you into this world in person. That is one of my absolute favorite things. And again, going back to your experience on that theme park ride, Aaron, or mine at Disney's MGM Studios, I think those were pretty core formative things for me. So that's something I'm always looking forward to, is getting together in person with you guys, and these worlds of escapism that connected so deeply with me growing up, that still connect deeply with me, and being able to just see and feel that in person. Like, it's just so cool to me being able to do that.
Yeah, and I think when we're at our best as a fandom, it's when we're remembering that we're all real people, regardless of whether or not we're actually together, that we're all just humans, and that goes for people who are too defensive about liking something. And I have been guilty of that many times in my life, as somebody who tends to like things first. I can get defensive about it. And I think people who don't like things have every right to not like something too. And I think it's a good reminder that at one point we were all that kid or that adult falling in love with this thing in the dark, being terrified. Like Dane Hallett said, running down the hallway so fast to get away from the TV, he fell and hit his head on the floor. Like, at some point we all had that moment where we were like, does anybody else in the world feel like this about this thing? And the reality is that we do. Like, there are so many of us out there in so many different places who love this thing in such a deep and real way. And we need to remember that we are all in this same boat together, in the same ship. And I think that we are at our best when we do that. And in terms of hanging out in person, I mean, getting to hang out with Jamie, that's like many of my favorite memories of the last decade of my life I've shared with this man. Adam, getting to hang out with you a couple times now has been unbelievable. Like, I'm always like, God, I wish we lived closer to each other. Like, it was so fun getting to meet Natasha and blah, blah, blah. Just wonderful times, getting to meet Hunter, who I think was in the chat earlier too. It really is an amazing gift that this franchise about the darkness in humanity has actually brought out the lightness in humanity. And I really hope that we all can remember that, because we will be better for it. And we will also have a much easier time navigating what's to come.
Indeed. And I think that's ultimately the community aspect is also the best thing about this. Is the connections that we make, is we've talked about learning about people's views and points and stuff like that, and it is learning those things and connecting through those things, and the friendships have been a wonderful part of this journey for me personally. And yeah, we by the way, we have just lost Jamie. We know he's going, so thank you to Jamie for coming on and chatting as well, and hopefully we'll have a lot more opportunities to continue that connection, and hopefully go more in the passionate route of things going forward. I hadn't intended for this to take the sort of critical turn that it did, but it's gone there, and that's kind of like a hard part of what we do as voices.
But this has been very therapeutic for me, because I have been so caught up in the now and in the drama of having this thing coming out, that I have kind of put that little 8-year-old in my head aside for a bit. And, thank you for giving me a chance to kind of reflect on that. Like, it's been really helpful for me.
Good. I'm glad. I want to go back to being a terrified 5-year-old. I'm very much stuck in this world of I fucking hate the corporate side of things now.
It does fascinate me though, Aaron. You're chasing the high of being scared. Like I'll remember.
You're a theme park guy. How can you?
Well, I was
not
about
get
to bring this up. Actually, I do get it, because I remember when I was a kid, I was so afraid of. There's a local coaster here, and it was the first time I ever did a loop on a coaster, and I was so scared of it. And then I remember later going to Universal in Florida, and that was the first like big suspended, just wild coaster I ever did, and I was still nervous and afraid, but I was like, this coaster's so cool. It's like I go through this castle and there's these big dragons and stuff. I gotta just do this. And then ever since then, I loved coasters. And it was the same with like the Indiana Jones Adventure dark ride at Disneyland. There's this spooky ass queue where you're going through this dark temple, and I was a kid at the time, and I was like, I'm very scared of this. And just like your dad, Aaron, my parents was like, nope, you're doing the ride. You meet the height requirement. You're doing the ride. So shut up and do it. And I did it, and I loved it, and I couldn't stop doing it. So I think there is still, and with Halloween season coming up, that we like being scared, and it's I think that's a good communal experience too, is having that. And it's something that we always love seeing with Alien is putting people back in that space of fear.
Indeed, because it's where the film succeeds so well, or at least originally. And I also like that there's so, Alien at its superficial surface is this glossy version of schlock. It is a movie presentation of a B movie, but there's so much more depth to it that we can appreciate and sort of identify with as we get on. And the horror thing is just it's that surface level thing of it. But for me, it reminds me of a time. It's that nostalgia factor. It reminds me of being a carefree teenager whose first avenues into talking about people. Oh my God, talking with people online about his passion was through the games. It was through the mail groups. I remember sitting there chatting away on the chat aspect of the game. You remember when we could talk in games, and a little bit of it is that sort of take me back to that time kind of thing. But just to also know that it's kind of like a little bit of an FU to Ridley Scott, when he says the alien's not scary anymore. The beast is cooked, as he likes to put it, whatever. And to be given physical reactions to it is a great way to prove him wrong in my mind. So it's a little bit spiteful in that regard. But I just love it when I'm made to feel something, and I'm made to feel terror like I was. And that is why I'm obsessed with it. And I just love that. I love being reminded of the reason I was so obsessed with this franchise.
And let me just say that my two favorite movie theater moments as an adult in Alien were the Backburster in Covenant and The Offspring in Romulus, both of which were moments where the theater that I was in groaned and people like actually covered their eyes and people like shrieked a little. And it goes to what you're saying, which is like Alien can still do that. Like Alien and Alien Earth, for as much as I love about it, doesn't have anything like that. The terror in Alien Earth is more existential, I think, but a little bit less about like being scared of the dark. But like those movie theater moments, like I hold on to that so much. And so when the rest of the movie doesn't work as well, I can very much revisit that. There's a reason when we're out in the woods with friends and somebody starts a fire, we gather around it and tell scary stories. We love to come together to be scared in the dark.
That moment in Romulus is one of my core Alien memories now. Every single fucking showing I was in, even that shitty first premiere showing, that reaction to The Offspring is just ingrained in my memory. That just deathly moment of silence followed by somebody going fucking hell or something like that. It's part of the reason I genuinely love that film. Just to go off to the side a little bit here, Romulus is, in my view, a passion-filled love letter to Alien, to the franchise, not just to the first two films, but to the franchise. Is a reconciliation of the lore, the prequel elements, some of the expanded universe elements. I fucking, I was really giddy when I heard Plagiarius Praepotens mentioned, and I saw Nox Hydra on the screen and stuff like that. One of the ways I described the film coming out of it was, this is like some fellow nerd has written me a RPG scenario. We've played it out and it's been filmed and realized. And that is an absolute compliment from me to everybody involved in the film, because it just feels like a love letter to me as a fan. And that is part of the reason I love that film so much. Even if I can do without the reused dialogue. Please stop doing that, modern sequels. But yeah. I think that's everything. Shall we wrap, lads? I don't think that there's more.
No, that was a good discussion. Really appreciate having you both on. Jamie had to run a little bit early, but yeah, no, I'm glad we could have this discussion. It's good for us too, I think, right now. So
after 8 weeks of being ambivalent about something, it's nice to have catharsis. So, Patrick. Do you want? It's unnecessary, but do you want to pimp out PO before?
Please. Please visit us at perfectorganism.com. We're available on all the podcast platforms. We, as kind of a little interesting aside, are going to be switching to a live format going forward, because the after shows were so much fun and we had so much engagement in the chat. So we're going to be doing most of our shows primarily via YouTube now. So if you'd like to be a part of that with us, just go ahead and subscribe to us at Perfect Organism Podcast on YouTube. And we'd love to, get you in the conversation. And again, we're here to help build community. And we have such respect for you guys. I mean, you guys have been such pioneers in this space and just such great dudes. And it's funny because our fandoms they don't even like align. It's just like the same circle of people. Like everybody who listens to our shows listens to the other one. But in case you don't, and you want to get even more Alien stuff, please give us a listen. We'd love to have you. And thank you guys so much for having us today.
It was nice to finally make it happen. It was a pleasure to have you and Jamie on.
Yeah, definitely.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you guys.
Adam, I don't like doing it.
So if you'd like to find us, you can always check us out on our main hub of activity, our website, avpgalaxy.net. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters who have joined us live in the chat for this recording. It's one of the perks we have on Patreon. So if you'd like to support what we do at AvP Galaxy, check out patreon.com/AvP Galaxy. We're also on all the major social channels: Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and now TikTok, much to Aaron's chagrin. But yeah, so that's everything.
And I want to say I'm here also as a patron, and you guys deliver very much. So definitely join their Patreon if you're on the fence about it, and join ours as well, because we do lots of stuff there too that you won't get anywhere else.
Much appreciated. And while we're talking community stuff, I do also want to shout out two of the other podcasts that I don't think we talk about enough, but the Xenomorphing, which is Dave Gogol's crew. And there's also this one I really don't think people know about, but it's a very charming podcast called Crew Expendable. And they are going through pretty much a lot of the comics and the books and the games with a bit of a fresh lens. They've come at it mostly being fans of the films, who are then now exploring the other bits. And it's been really interesting to listen to their sort of takes on it for the first time. Adam, I just listened to one they done a couple of months ago on Steel Egg, a book I
have not read that book.
A book I fucking hated, and they actually very much enjoyed, but it was nice to listen to their takes on it. So we will get to the DH press stuff eventually. It's one of the things I do love about this is that there is, even after all this time, even after 240 episodes that we've done, you guys are nearly cracking 300. There is a lot of stuff still out there to talk about, and it's a fascinating aspect of the franchise.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you everybody for listening or watching. This has been Corporal Hicks,
RidgeTop,
and Patrick Greene,
signing off.